Hello and welcome to another Organization Behavior podcast. Today we're going to start talking about motivation. I've broken this into two separate sections so we can talk about it a bit more broadly. What exactly is motivation? I mean, we have some implicit theories. How do you get people to do what you want them to do? Well, let me read this for you. Aristotle, in his book of Rhetoric, said, "Thus every action must be due to one or other of 7 causes: chance, nature, compulsion, habit, reasoning, anger, or appetite." Of these, he talked about emotion and reason, or in this case, appetite, where we seek to gain pleasure and reduce pain. That's what he meant by appetite. Thus, he predated Freud's pleasure pain theory by about 2,000 years. But that's how he thought we should get people to do what we want them to do. Got a couple more here, though, for you. Napoleon Bonaparte: "There are 2 levers for moving men, interest and fear." There is only one way to get anybody to do anything, and that is by making the other person want to do it. Dale Carnegie, who wrote the successful book, How to Win Friends and Influence People. Let's see. Motivation is the art of getting people to do what you want them to do because they want to do it. President Dwight David Eisenhower. And finally, 2 more. We know nothing about motivation. All we can do is write books about it. Peter Drucker, who probably wrote more about management than any man who ever lived. And then finally, the difference between a successful person and others is not a lack of strength, not a lack of knowledge, but rather a lack of will. That's Coach Vince Lombardi, an absolute expert on motivation. So we have these ideas about how we get people motivated, how we get them to do what we need them to do. So let's start going through them. It's a psychological process, causes arousal, direction, and persistence. That's how we start breaking these things down. But basically what we're trying to do is there's a behavioral and psychological process here. People link the motivation to the behavior. We want them to do X. We provide the appropriate motivation. They do X. But what do we know about it? Well, not too much, actually. I mean, it's based somewhat on our theories of personality. People adapt to environments. Human behavior is goal-directed. We know that. Internal and external factors affect that behavior. The perception of the future affects behavior now. But some of the basic parts of these theories, are what we call needs. Well, in needs theories, we're looking at people do what they do to fulfill various needs. There's things like needs for affiliation, that is, associate with others, have friends, join groups. We have need for autonomy, which is to be independent and not influenced by others. A need for deference, which is we need to have people respect us, to defer to our authority, admire us. We have a need for dominance, influence others, affect the direction of the group. But how do we can use these in needs theories? Well, you're familiar with one. Maslow's hierarchy of needs. He says there are 5 groups of basic needs. Healthy adults try to satisfy these needs. They're so basic they motivate behavior in many cultures. So we have the first of all, the base level of the pyramid, the physiological needs, the basic requirements of the human body: food, water, sleep. Air might be important. Safety needs are the next layer up. Protection from the physical and economic harm. We want a roof over our heads. We want a job. We can earn enough money to buy food. There's a next set of social needs. A need of belongingness. That's a need of affiliation again. To belong to something larger than ourselves. Then, of course, there's a need for affection and to be in the company of others. Humans are by nature social animals. Very few of us go off in the woods like Henry David Thoreau and live in a small cabin alone. Then there are esteem needs. Esteem, is how we view ourselves and how others view us. It's self-confidence and a sense of self-worth. We get that esteem from others. We get it from within ourselves as well. And finally, at the top of Maslow's pyramid, there's this idea of self-actualization, where there's a desire for self-fulfillment. So what happens in Maslow's theory is that as we occupy or as we satisfy the needs on each level, we move up to the next level and have those needs left unfulfilled, and that provides the motivation. We'll keep going until we're self-actualized. And self-actualization is almost a Zen-like state. If you know, when you really start reading Maslow, that you attain some sense of enlightenment, which is why it's a hierarchy. Lower needs are supplanted by higher order needs. Part of a problem with this, though, as I said it in class, it gets very interesting that every management textbook in the world talks about Maslow's hierarchy of needs. One slight problem: there's almost no empirical support for it. That is, there's no proof, if you will. Although we never use the word proof. Remember, in the scientific method, there's no proof of any of this being true. Maslow himself never found it. So there's some other things that were happening out there. ERG theory. Some of Maslow's acolytes and others within the organization behavior discipline decided to pursue this because they saw some value here. That's one of the reasons it's still in all the textbooks, by the way. It's not that we reject it entirely, although I'd probably be happier if we did, being that there's no empirical support for it, so I think we should be very careful about how we use it. But there is a basic idea that, well, people do work to fulfill needs. You know, we try to fulfill utility. It's that economic man model. So some folks within it, tried to make Maslow's theory work, and there's been a couple of attempts, more or less successful. The first of these is ERG theory: existence, relatedness, growth. And these are trying to regroup our idea of needs. Existence needs are, again, the physical and material wants. Relatedness, desire for interpersonal relationships. And growth, desire to be creative and productive to use one's skills. Nice thing about ERG is it takes Maslow's 5 levels and compresses them into 3. The other nice thing about it is, by being very judicious with the way we operationalize terms, able to find a little bit more support for this. There's frustration, regression. Sometimes we move down the hierarchy. There's a deficiency cycle, more strongly desire existence needs when they're unsatisfied. So all this has been seen in there. Clay Alderfer worked in that area as well, along with McClellan. McClellan went beyond the ERG, and he called it his achievement motivation theory. They're looking at the behavioral effects of 3 needs: the need for achievement, the need for power, and the need for affiliation. And here they were a lot better organized, and their theory had a lot more thought that was put into it. I mean, not that Maslow was just making this stuff up off the top of his head, but I don't think he delved deeply enough into human cognition to really understand why people do what they do. McClellan is probably the next best effort to do that. I mean, they looked for 3 needs: achievement, power, affiliation. They spent most of their time looking at the need for achievement. In fact, if you look on the website, I've included Clay Alderfer's thematic apperception test. That apperception test is a way that we check our need for affiliation. There's a picture there. You're going to describe the picture. The software will look for keywords in your picture and get back to you. But there was a very long-running research program, some controversy over the measurement methods, because what we're doing is called content analysis. And we're measuring the strength of words and what variety of words that are used. But there have been some recent studies that show validity is using different measures of this. People that have a very strong need for achievement tend to take results for behavior. These people are willing to take calculated risks in order to accomplish their goals. You acquire the need for achievement through socialization to cultural values. Presence of need for achievement themes in folklore, mythology, and art. I mean, why do we build bridges? Why do we climb mountains? Because we have this need for achievement. Societies that have a high need for achievement had high levels of economic development. Makes a lot of sense. Power over people, that's not Machiavellianism. It's just some people have a very strong desire to be in charge. We don't necessarily call them control freaks because that's something different psychologically. But I know from experience that, I'm a little bit more comfortable when I'm in charge because you don't have anybody looking over your shoulder. On the other hand, when stuff goes wrong, you're the guy they're going to blame. So you can demonstrate that need for power by dominance, which is physical aggression, exploitation. We're going to view situations as win-lose. We can also do it through persuasion and personal influence. We can convince you to go down the route that we want. This type of power characterized effective leaders, according to McClellan and his group. And then people with a strong need for affiliation are focused on establishing, maintaining, restoring positive, affective relations. Remember that word affect, affective, it means emotions, with others. They want close, warm interpersonal relationships. We're heading somewhere now that should look familiar to you. Theory X, Theory Y. So, like many people, want other people to like them and want to be in the company of others. So, managers and executives tend to have a stronger need for achievement than people in other occupations. Not surprisingly, if you take an average school of business students, we're going to find that you guys score much higher on this type of instrument than folks that are in the arts. There's a strong need for achievement as an entrepreneurial characteristic as well. In fact, there's some entrepreneurial surveys, which I don't put too much faith in, but need for achievement is very high on those as well. But again, the results are mixed. The measures are controversial. So we're a little bit further down that road, but we're still not quite there. Friedrich Hertzberg came up with his motivation hygiene theory. And basically what he did was looked at the stuff out there and said, yeah, but there are some things that are motivators, and there are some things that are dismotivators. And it's not really two ends of the same continuum. It's two different continua. So, dissatisfiers are items predominantly found in the description of negative events. I got a lousy salary, a lousy office. I work ridiculous hours, that kind of thing. If you improve the dissatisfiers, make those better, you don't get higher satisfaction. You have less dissatisfaction. So people don't come in grumbling about their job anymore, but they're not terribly happy about it either. What you have to do is add satisfiers. These are things like, self-esteem, that they have some intrinsic rewards from the job. They're doing something that's challenging and interesting. These things are actually motivators and satisfiers. So you get those things going. You've got those two continua. And we're on to something here. I think Hertzberg, he called the satisfiers motivators and the dissatisfiers hygiene factors. It was interesting, though. You got to always look at the samples he used. Found out that salary itself was just hygiene rather than a motivator. But his original sample was all certified professional accountants. So that might be a problem there. You've got a very biased sample when it comes to that kind of thing. So the idea that people are motivated by fulfilling their needs is not a new one to us. I mean, it is the economic man model after all. What we're attempting to do here is to satisfy those needs. It's why we have reward systems in organizations. We give people a reward. In this case, we're trying to satisfy their needs, and thereby they're going to do those things that we want them to do. Well, I'm going to leave you there today, and hopefully, you're enjoying reading this stuff so far. I've thrown some videos up there as well on the web. So look that stuff over, and I'll see you all again next week. Thanks much.